Good evening and welcome to New Foundation Unity. This is class number 5 on relationships in the Bible. Tonight we're going to be talking about friends and adversaries. And next week will be the grand finale of this portion, which will be the fulfillment of relationship. If anyone is having technical difficulties, and so far only one person, but email Mark at truthunity.net, and later on, round about 8 o'clock, there will be a time to ask questions, make comments, and the number is 816-729-3360. And so as we begin our time together, I invite you to find a comfortable place in your seat and close your eyes. This is Charles Fillmore's invocation. I am now in the presence of pure being and immersed in the Holy Spirit of life, love, and wisdom. I acknowledge thy presence and thy power, O blessed Spirit. In thy divine wisdom, now erase my mortal limitations, and from thy pure substance of love, bring into manifestation my world according to thy perfect law. And know that you are always in the presence of pure being. God is present in you when you recognize it. And as we take a few moments in the silence, acknowledge that presence and power. Affirm that presence and power at the center of your being, that presence and power that renews and restores and revitalizes and purifies and brings into manifestation everything into form. And so for a few moments in the silence, let us rest in that awareness of pure being at the center of my being in the silence. And now, as we begin to return our attention to this time and this place, we give thanks that the source is within us, the source of infinite possibilities, the source of infinite good, the source of everything we could ever need, require, and desire at the very core of our being, and that we can return here at any moment. And for an awareness of that truth that sets us free, we are so grateful, and we do give thanks in the name and through the power of the Christ that lives within us all. Amen.
I have a technical question.
Yes.
I couldn't find the information for sisters or anything, or this one or the next one anywhere. So
Okay.
I couldn't find it on your website, and I couldn't find it on the...
It is on my website, but I'll get you some hard
Okay.
copies.
Okay.
All right. Okay. We started out this course by talking about our primary relationship, which is the relationship of creator to creation, which is one of oneness. In all the relationships we have considered subsequently, namely husband and wife, male and female, brothers, sisters, brothers and sisters, there have been places of disharmony with resolution. And so as we move into this category of friendships, friends and adversaries, let us look at that in the light of the one relationship, and if there are disharmonies there, how they are or could be resolved. So I'm going to start with Ruth and Naomi. Ruth and Naomi, it's a very short book. And a beautiful story that actually is often included in a wedding ceremony. Friendship has the possibility of being closer than any other kind of relationship. So here's the situation. Naomi and her husband and her 2 sons went to Moab from Bethlehem. Pay attention to the names of the places here. They went to Moab because there was a famine in Israel. And sometimes when we feel a kind of a spiritual dry place, we're in a kind of spiritual dry place, we look to the outside and we metaphysically go to Moab, thinking things will be better. So while they are in Moab, Naomi's husband...
Wait a minute, so was that a mistake to go to Moab?
No mistakes. This is the story.
But you said,
This is...
thinking
I
things
think that
would
was
be
an
better.
aside.
Thinking things would be better. It sounded like the tone was not positive. I don't know that.
Oh.
I'm sorry. I missed it.
Every story has a conflict and a resolution. But sometimes we do look other places. If we're in a spiritual desert or in a creative block, then we look to the outside. Sometimes we do that. All right. So what happened in Moab is that Naomi's husband dies, which leaves her with 2 sons who are both married to Moabites, Orpah and Ruth. So Ruth is Naomi's daughter-in-law, just so you get the relationships clear. Okay, so then the two sons die. And as you perhaps recall, widows and all, now there's 3 widows here. They are in a very vulnerable place because widows have no source of support, no one providing for them, and they were very vulnerable to being taken advantage of in a number of ways. So Naomi decides to go home to Bethlehem, an obvious symbol, all right? And the 2 girls, one of them, she entreats both of them to go back to their parents because that's what was done. Okay, you go home to your parents. And Ruth refuses to do that. She said, very famous passage here, she says, "Where you go, I will go. Where you go, I will go. Where you live, I will live. Your God will be my God. Your people will be my people." And this is an incredible passage because in order for her to do that, she has to leave everything behind. She's going to a new country. She's going to a place where they have different customs. She's going to a place where she will be discriminated against, not only as a widow, but as a Moabite.
Obviously the author of this book had a purpose in like the first 3 verses when he fixes where they are and where they're going. Okay, hang on, let me finish my question. And so Moab is the son of Lot's eldest daughter. Mm-hmm. And so were they like unaware that this is like Lot's descendant and they're really the same family and they got the same God? They go back to Abraham?
It's not though, because the one traces back to Abraham. Lot is the nephew and a very in their minds. Okay, we'll get to the places in a minute because this is all going to come to a resolution. And the Israelites have this sense of purity, and normally Ruth would have been an outcast in a place.
As Lot's descendant, she would be an outcast? Really?
As a Moabite and as a widow.
But Moab is the son of Lot.
That's a place. Oh, Moab is the son of Lot. That's why it's named after that.
Yeah,
Moabites are the sons of Lot.
It's a different meaning because Lot is in the subconscious. Abraham, it represents faith. Okay, let's wait until you hear the end of the story and then we'll go there. Okay, so the 2 of them return together. The important piece here is that Ruth leaves everything behind and makes this total commitment. She says, Ruth says, "Entreat me not to leave you, or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if even death parts me from you." And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. So Naomi, the only good thing that Naomi takes back with her is Ruth. All right, so they get back there. And here are two widows. Fortunately, and I'll explain to you some of the laws that go along with property here. Naomi has her husband, before he died, had this property, and she was part of it. The woman was a part of the property. Okay. And so it looks like the nearest male relative could buy the property, but what would go with it would have to be Naomi and now Ruth, because she's a friend, okay, that is being taken care of. So the plot thickens. She goes out to glean the wheat. And what that means is that she follows behind the reapers. They're harvesting. Okay, we're having a harvest here. This is a time of plenty. She follows along behind them. And this was a privilege given to the poor. All right, and so she would pick up the grain that fell out of the reapers.
We're back in Bethlehem.
Yeah, back in Bethlehem.
Isn't that the law, though? Wasn't the Deuteronomic law, was that the people who harvested the land were not to reap to the corners of the field so that the poor could have something to eat?
Yes. And so she was following along because she asked permission to do this. And she gets to this part of the land that Boaz owns. And Boaz, one of the relatives, he protects her. He tells everyone that she should stay right there on his plot, and then she will not be molested. And she's a hard worker, so she gets a little to eat herself and to take home to Naomi. And he invites her to have some food with him. And she goes home and she tells Naomi what had happened. And so Naomi tells her how to propose to a man. Kind of a cool story.
Sounds like Rebecca.
So she says, here's what you do. Go back to the fields, and after he's had his meal, then go down to where he'll go lie down, and then you're going to go and uncover his feet and lie down by his feet. Now, this was not a come on in that kind of a sense, but it was simply something that was done. I'll try to explain. This is not my culture, so it's a little difficult to explain the rules. But anyway, so she does that. And she goes and she lies down at his feet, and he wakes up after some time and discovers there's a woman there. And he said, who are you? And it's dark, so she re-identifies herself, and she says, put your skirt, the men wore robes, put your robe over me. And so she's asking for his protection. In order to receive that protection, he has to ask somebody who's more closely related to Naomi's late husband. And he goes and he ties the deal to, if you get this property, you have to take on the protection of this Moabite widow. And that's part of the deal. And he declined. So Boaz and Ruth get married. So already good has begun to come to her. This is part of the abundance because he's a wealthy man in Bethlehem. She now has protection. And so the first child, I mean, this is so amazing. The first child goes to her dead husband so that the property can be perpetually in the family, and then all the rest of the children are her second husbands. All right, so he worked it out completely perfectly, and the importance of this is that Boaz was...
All the children were Boaz's children.
Yes, but the first one he gave to the dead husband so that the property could remain in that guy's family. And Boaz became the grandfather of David, the father of Jesse and the grandfather of David. And it shows, and she says to him, "What have I done to get this kind of favor?" And he says, "You have been so kind to Naomi." It was a mutual kindness that you certainly deserve the same kind of protection that she does. Now, you read this and you think, in Israel, a Moabite, they're enemies. You know, it's kind of like Good Samaritan, the oxymoron. This is an Israelite group that has this purity thing, a purity of the bloodline. And here, so Ruth is part of the lineage of Jesus. Okay, so
this is the story of consciousness. How does the blood lineage work?
you want to?
What does it tell us about that?
Yeah, that's what we're gonna talk about. So first of all, the fact that Naomi goes home, there is that inner urge in all of us to find our way back home. Bethlehem is the home. Bethlehem is where Jesus was born. Bethlehem is a city without walls. It's on a hill, but no walls, unbounded, unlimited. And and because of this loyalty and love on the part of a foreigner, she is accepted into this bloodline of consciousness of love. David represents love, so she fits in as the grandmother by marriage of Jesse, who is the father of David, who represents love because David unified the 12 tribes. Okay, so the qualities involved here: faithfulness, Ruth to Naomi, Boaz to Ruth, that kindness, who is a despised Moabite widow with no money, and she agrees to go with Naomi's religion. And so Naomi and Boaz, by bringing them together, God brings them together for God's purpose, which is to continue this bloodline for a consciousness of love. Also, note that Ruth makes an absolutely clean break. She doesn't bring any of the Moabite, which represents the material and the physical. Nothing from her former country, none of the customs, none of the religion, and she starts fresh. And Boaz, just this quality of integrity and honesty, because he follows through on his commitments. And so, because of the protection and the care over these widows, they get in return safety, security, and marriage, and prosperity. So you can see the movement. You want to look at the phrases that indicates movement in consciousness. So we go from famine. There was a famine in Bethlehem, in Israel. Famine to prosperity through Ruth's marriage to Boaz. Love and respect. And it's all for God's purpose, God guiding the entire activity through God's love and compassion for this whole web of relationship here. There's another and so you haven't read the Job one yet, but I was going to ask you when we get there, what similarities in this journey do you see between this and Job? So in essence, if I were going to describe what the essence of friendship, it is unconditional love. Is it not? Isn't that? I'll take on your God, I'll take on your home. I'm not bringing anything with me. I'm just bringing myself and my attachment to you. What other kind of, that's God love. I've always thought that my friends were more precious than any of my relatives. For that reason, because there's nothing that causes conflict. You're totally free. Okay, so the study questions. It begins by saying the setting is in time of the judges. And what do we know about judges? It was the time before Israel was united. The time of the judges was when there were 12 tribes. Okay, they've gotten into the promised land and they're going to divide up the land, but there's 12 tribes. And what unites the 12 tribes, finally, is David. It takes a long time coming, but hey, when we meditate, is all of your past stuff cleared up? No, it takes a while to bring all those fragments of consciousness into one wholeness. So it's a consciousness of love that unifies. Charles Fillmore says it's universal unity. Love is not discriminating, and as a human quality, we love everything. But as a spiritual quality, it is the quality of unity, of longing to be one with the divine. Okay. So now, was there anything that you wanted to ask Chuck about that? And you see, you have to accept the parameters of the story. It's not about whether you think that it's, that because Lot's related. It comes, and for the Israelites, that was important, that they traced their origin to Abraham. Abraham and Lot separated because Lot was part of the subconscious. Okay, would you rather be descended from your subconscious? I don't think so.
I was just trying to clarify the parameters of the story. I wasn't trying to rebel against them. I was just trying
Oh,
to
okay.
clarify this.
Okay. Yeah. Um, okay, so in this story, Naomi represents what aspect of our being?
Sweetness. Beloved soul failed to unite.
Okay,
Itself with
soul.
God.
The feminine represents the intuition, the subconscious, the feeling nature. Okay, that's Naomi.
But interestingly, it said the soul failed to unite itself with God. But then she comes up with Ruth, who is love of the,
Yeah.
who's kind of an
yes.
all-embracing love. And then that,
That's right. A sort of natural love that, but it's like I'll share every aspect of your life with you. And so there was that longing within her as well to be part of the whole. Okay, so Ruth is the grandmother of David. And partly this was to point out the narrowness of the views that the Jews had towards foreigners. You know, the other. Here is the one power, one presence. You know, Judaism, very much one source. And then they have all these rules regarding foreigners and widows and all of this. So that's another aspect of it.
So what's accomplished in consciousness evolution by this exclusiveness that's being presented?
That we are all exclusive. We are all the chosen ones if we choose. Okay. It's not, see, it was used in the sense to separate themselves, to put themselves above. And if you hold any beliefs that either make you inferior or superior to others, then you are not loving God.
So the people in the lineage of Abraham are not loving God because they're making themselves exclusive. I'm trying to make sense of this. I don't understand it yet.
Because this is about us. So let's think about us. Abraham in us is faith. Okay. Abraham represents the quality of faith. And when we first begin to evolve, think of, okay, so you start going to unity. Let's just use this as an example. And wow, you feel excited because you suddenly have some control over your life. You can demonstrate something. And you say, oh, I am evolved. All right, we see this all the time, that people in every religion think their way is better, and that there are people who get kicked out because they're not following the theology. There are people we love to make ourselves superior, show our value in some way other than our oneness with God. Okay, so if you choose a relationship with God, you've chosen the highest. And the thing that has happened in institutionalized religion is that the outer symbols, the outer observances, and the rituals have taken the place of that direct relationship with God. And Jesus says, go direct. You don't have to go through priests. You don't have to do that. Do you see the difference? And that we go through this phase where we maybe go through rituals. We go to a place where there's rituals and beliefs and observances, just like in the Judaic, the law, 613 laws, rituals, and observances.
So this exclusiveness is the naivete of our consciousness in its beginning. And so we should be anticipating that we're going to outgrow that at some point in time in this evolution record here. Right?
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely a phase. It's definitely a phase.
And that sort of non-exclusive element comes in and blends.
Love is all
and
inclusive. Love is all inclusive, and it's love that unites you to the source. Okay, so it's love versus all these laws. And yet Boaz uses the law in such a way as to, because of his love and his inclusiveness, which demonstrates that you don't have to shut out foreigners. You want to include the loving, faithful qualities of the soul.
So we should see in this tribes of Israel and this Jewish lineage here that number one, that on the positive they chose God. In their immaturity, they chose to be exclusive.
That's good. Yeah.
And because the story is very honest. The story is very honest. The story says Naomi heard there was food back in the homeland, so hey, let's go back to the homeland. And the story is very honest because it says, as soon as Moab sees Ruth, he goes, "Wow, who's that?"
Yeah.
I mean, so the story is very honest. The story's not setting up.
Right.
I mean, it's not exclusively because this longing to go back to the homeland. She heard there was bread there. It's not exclusively, he's trying to be, all exclusive, all inclusive, loving kindness. There was a definite attraction there, and he saw her out of the crowd, and I mean, the story's pretty honest.
Well, and he noticed her because she was totally present in what she was doing. She was poor, and she was, all the poor could do this, but here she was, and she worked from morning until night. She was quite diligent, and he noticed that quality, and he asked and said, "Who is this?" And she is the Moabite's widow. And he had heard how Ruth had been so loyal to Naomi that she had left everything behind. I don't know if you have had a situation where you have found yourself in a foreign land, so to speak, and felt like you had lost everything. And isn't there a longing, in whatever form that longing takes? It can be for food, spiritual nourishment. When you see food, automatically see nourishment. And when you hear home, that's consciousness within you of Bethlehem, of that place of freedom. Okay. So ideas are male and female too. The soul is male and female. And ideas, like the faculties, are male or female as well. Okay, and here it's just one great configuration of love and inclusiveness. And each gets what he or she needs. That everything is provided in kind of, it's kind of one of those compact stories, so it has a happy ending. Okay, everybody gets what they want. Yeah. Including, it's kind of like an annulment that the husband whose dad isn't really dead, and he's got, he's got a son, so the son gets to have more property and carry on the family line. I mean, it's a kind of an extraordinary love story.
And just as I know it's a detail, and I don't mean anything by it. I'm just Ruth and Boaz are the great grandparents of David. It's Boaz, David, Jesse. I mean, it's Boaz, Obed, Jesse, David. So there's four generations.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's right. Great grandfather. Yes. Okay. All right. So that's enough of them, and we're going to move on. This is another extraordinary love story, and this is Jonathan and David. This is in 1 Samuel, and it starts in chapter 18. Here's the situation. Jonathan is the son of Saul, Saul being the first king of Israel. Israel, they hear all the 12 tribes, they go to Samuel and they say, we want a king. And Samuel says, no, you don't want a king. And they kept asking. Finally Samuel says, okay, you can have a king. And Saul is king number 1. Now, Saul represents that faculty of will, the executive. All right, the king is the executive, faculty of will. All right, in chapter, I'm going to read this. Did I say 18? I think so.
19 to 21 is what you got on the board.
Okay. All right. So David has just slain Goliath. All right. And Saul is jealous, not only because Jonathan and David have a liking for one another, but he's jealous because of these things. Saul has slain thousands, Philistines, and David has slain 10,000s. They do not even count past 100 at that time. And they don't even know what 1,000 is, but it's more, 10,000 is obviously more. And so that is very threatening to Saul. Now, David, Jonathan, I'm trying to find. Anyway, Jonathan loves David as his own soul. I can't find the exact reference here. I had it marked, but it's gone.
You just put these on the board tonight. They weren't on the list.
Yeah, I just put them on tonight. Okay, so here's the interaction of these three. Saul representing the will, Jonathan representing the soul, and David representing love or the spirit. Okay, 3 aspects of being here. And as I said, these faculties can be male or female. Saul is willful. He's jealous. And so jealous that when he finds continually that Jonathan sides with David, he decides he'll have to kill him. But the first thought is that he'll send him to fight the Philistines, and the Philistines will take care of it for him. So he tells David he wants the foreskins of 100 Philistines, and that will be his dowry, and he'll give Saul his daughter in marriage. Michal, yes, her name is Michal. And so after David says, oh, no, I'm not worthy, a few times, he ends up and he goes and he brings back the foreskins of 200 Philistines. And again, the people give him more acclaim and more acclaim. Saul tries to kill David 3 times. And twice Jonathan saves him. Jonathan warns him about this. And when he finds out that Jonathan warns him, he gets in a rage. And he has to have his demons calmed with David's harp music. This is interesting because just recently, as someone doing research during this time wondered why it was that David had this ability to calm these demons of Saul. Saul hated him, and he would go into these rages, and David would play the harp, and everything would calm down. And so this research, somebody contemporaneously now has looked into the original music scripts of the chords and old documents of the Psalms of David, and found that it was a whole different scale, and that the music was in such harmony that it wasn't that he was a better harp player, and it wasn't that he was a talented musician, but it was like the frequencies of the notes were very soothing, which is fascinating. Okay, so twice David has a chance to kill Saul, and he doesn't do that. And so already you can see that there's this aspect of forgiveness, of giving back good for evil. In the law in Judaic times was an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Someone tries to kill you, you have the right to kill him. Right? He resists that urge. And so finally, this is getting very serious. And here's the plan, that there's a dinner for the new moon. It's a new moon dinner. David is supposed to be there. And so he concocts an excuse and waits until Saul notices his absence. And then he asks Jonathan where he is. And so Jonathan tells this excuse, and Saul flies into a rage, accusing him of betrayal, that he's, given him permission to be absent from this dinner, and David has to, at once warned, he has to flee, he has to leave. But they devise a scheme. And the scheme is like this. This is a prearranged signal, and Jonathan is trying to reassure David that everything will calm down. And David says, well, how will I know? He says, well, tomorrow, find out the intention, what Saul's going to do. And if he says everything's cool and everything, I'm invited back, then shoot some arrows. And shoot these arrows. Arrows here represent thoughts of love. Shoot these arrows, and I'll tell a lad to go fetch them. And if it's not cool, it's not safe for you to come back, I'll tell the lad to go way beyond. And so, guess what? He tells to go way beyond. And then they make this covenant, and this is kind of the focal point of this friendship. And the covenant. And when the lad came to the place of the arrow, which Jonathan had shot, Jonathan called after the lad and said, "Is not the arrow beyond you?" And Jonathan called after the lad, "Hurry, make haste, stay not." So Jonathan, lad, gathered up the arrows and came to his master. But the lad knew nothing. Only Jonathan and David knew the matter. And Jonathan gave his weapons to his lad and said to him, "Go and carry them to the city." And as soon as the lad had gone, David rose from behind the stone heap and fell on his face to the ground and bowed 3 times. And they kissed one another and wept with one another until David recovered himself. Then Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, for as much as we have sworn, both of us, in the name of the Lord, saying, 'The Lord shall be between me and you, and between my descendants and your descendants forever.'" And he rose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. Okay. Again, the same kind of loyalty. He goes against his father to be loyal to David, representing love. He asks for only this. He says, "Please never let there be a rift between this lineage and yours." And so, if anything, if I die, then be sure that there is still always a connection. And here is the connection. So, and this is after Jonathan dies. Saul kills himself. David said, "Is there still anyone left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Now there was a servant at the house of Saul whose name was Ziba, and they called him to David, and the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" And he said, "Your servant is he." And the king said, "Is there not still someone of the house of Saul, that I may show the kindness of God to him? There is still a son of Jonathan. He is crippled in his feet." Meaning?
Understanding.
Yes, a lame understanding. The king said to him, "Where is he?" "He is in the house of Machir, the son of Ammiel, at Lodebar." Then King David sent and brought from the house of Machir, the son of Ammiel, at Lodebar, and Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, son of Saul, came to David and fell on his face and did obeisance. And David said, "Mephibosheth." And he answered, "Behold, your servant." And David said to him, "Do not fear, for I will show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. And I will restore to you all the land of Saul, your father. And you shall eat at my table always." And he did obeisance and said, "What is your servant that you should look upon a dead dog such as I?" Okay, dogs were not in good repute in that time. All right, so Mephibosheth, so look what he's getting. He's getting the inheritance of his father. You see, initially, the reason Jonathan wanted David to marry his daughter was to ensure that the lineage would pass down in the family of Saul. That he didn't want David to get it. It was already preordained. Anyway, so Mephibosheth, so he gets land and he gets to eat at the king's table, to take in that, appropriate that that love that David represents. So he unites all parts of the kingdom out of love for Jonathan. So again, this friendship with Jonathan led to not just, kind of like on a personal level, a resolution, but it led to a forgiveness of the evil that Saul was up to by restoring his son to the level of inheritance. He's an heir now to the kingdom.
So Mephibosheth is lame in both feet.
Yeah.
And so there are parts of us that don't understand. Mm-hmm. And so David's showing love to Mephibosheth is ourselves not being unkind even to those parts of us that don't understand stuff, even those parts of us that are still maybe other people may see as rough edges. Is that we have to have peace within ourselves.
Absolutely.
And just letting those parts of us that don't understand until it's their time.
That's right. So crippled in both feet, that means lame in mental understanding, intellectual understanding, and lame in the emotional qualities as well. And calling himself, have you ever called yourself some awful name? Probably not a dead dog, but
Well, yeah, you might.
but yeah, you could have. So here again is a story. It's a love story from friends. The love, the loyalty is to the friendship and not to the king who is willful and selfish and wanting to harm. So interesting. So that's Mephibosheth.
I'm
Yeah, go ahead.
And this may not be the place to answer it, but I just got to throw the question out there before I forget it. So this is the story of ourselves, and so there may be some aspect of ourself that is not profiting us. That's the Saul in us. But out of that may come something that we love, the Jonathan. And so there may be a multiple of pieces within us that is causing us some confusion. But the only way we're going to work that is to just accept it all and let it do its thing, or what?
Well,
Do you understand what I'm saying? The question.
Yeah.
Remember the diagram that I gave you?
Yeah, consciousness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so David is what redeems all these fragments of consciousness. So if we have love for ourselves, even the lame feet, you know, and you look at yourself and you say, this is part of the whole, and I'm going to love these pieces into wholeness. Because remember, the primary relationship is oneness. And so at some point, all these tribes
Yeah.
within us, all these faculties, faith, strength, love, judgment, all of that has to be redeemed. It has to be reconciled back into the whole. And it's love that is the faculty of love that is responsible for that, the universal unifying faculty, bringing everything in, the all-inclusive. And just as in the Ruth and Naomi story, it's love that includes the Moabite widow and the wealthy Bethlehem Boaz. Okay.
So let's take it to a different level then. And so, even though Ruth had seen bread again in Bethlehem, and Boaz saw this attractive young girl amongst the girls in the tribe, and I know I'm just so, but they're really guiding principles within them. You know, Ruth and Boaz were able to take all these things and put them together and make something, and something really good can come out of that. Mm-hmm. With that, because
that's right.
Their overriding sense of thing was back to the source. Mm-hmm. Being kind, being generous,
right,
and all those other little things get redeemed and reconciled.
Exactly.
Within that overarching direction.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the agents in these, the Ruth and the David in the two stories, that are they're the yeast in the dough. I mean, they're the ones who are bringing these things together.
Okay.
Which are representing faculty of love.
Yes,
They
exactly.
both are love, yeah.
Well, they're both soul. Because they're both women. And just as David says, and Jonathan says, I love David as my own soul, so too, you know, here is, you know, I love Ruth, I love Naomi as my own soul.
Okay, so you just threw something in it. I need to square away. So soul is female, so is spirit male or body male? How are we doing it? Because you just threw something out there.
Soul is male and female.
So it's the male aspect of the soul. I mean, the female aspect of the soul that is being acted out here.
Female act of the soul
is
feeling. Okay, so feeling and feeling, there's love here.
Yeah, because some of us are, you said, so this is the soul, so this is the female. So it made me think that soul is female. You didn't say this is the female aspect of the soul. You just
Yes.
Okay.
Thinking and feeling. Intellect and intuition.
Got it. You said soul and female, and I thought
sometimes
you were trying to make that
the woman symbolizes the soul, but there's also the thinking aspect that is there. Another thing between Jonathan and David was that David was from the tribe of Judah, which was the strongest tribe amongst the tribe, and Saul was from the weakest. So there was this jealousy, competition, aggression, stemming from jealousy on all these counts of, status and, his tribe is weaker than mine, and his tribe is stronger than mine. He's getting more acclaim because he's killed more Philistines. He's suddenly David, this little guy who killed Goliath with a stone, is now suddenly emerging as the great hero, and becomes a great warrior. Of course, the warrior is what prevents him from building the temple. It takes a new consciousness to build the temple. You have to have not just love, but you have to have understanding. And
boy, that's really confusing, because so out of this representation of love comes the soldier that sheds blood and therefore is prevented from building the temple. That's a whole long stream of complicated things.
Okay,
but it's the evolution, isn't it? It's like the next iteration.
That's a devolution.
No, it's the evolution, because you okay, so here's the faculty of love, but love can't work by itself. No faculty can stand alone in supporting the Christ. And so it has to join. Always, the disciples went out 2 by 2. They have to have at least 2 or 3 in order for the Christ to emerge. Love is not enough. Okay. So his son Solomon gets to build the temple. And why? Because Solomon asks for an understanding heart.
So David, as this friend of Jonathan, represents love in that scheme, in that thing, that little piece there. I'm just trying to be loose. But David, in creating a kingdom as the king, is a soldier. He has to do those kinds of things. So what is the attribute what's the faculty that's being exemplified by David as king soldier as opposed to David as friend love? What's up? We got David friend love, then we have David king what? What's the faculty there?
Well, wisdom or understanding.
No. That's not what goes to war.
No, it's the love that
war
unites the faculties, but he just had to do it with force, because getting into the promised land, there were all these warring tribes. And not only the warring tribes, but the faculties themselves were at war. Look at Saul and David. And so you cannot, with one faculty, support the Christ. You have to have another one. And that other one is wisdom. So love and understanding, love and judgment actually, love and judgment equal wisdom. Solomon represents wisdom, and that is always, as we're going along, we have an evolution of a higher state that has its own work to do. So David did his job just as Moses did his, and now Solomon is going to do his, and he asked for an understanding heart, and he became a judge, a wise judge, and the richest man on the planet.
And also, when we look just at the stories that we're dealing with today, the Ruth Boaz was bringing disparate groups together in love.
Yes.
And then the 12 tribes were still dispersed. And David brings them together through force, but love through with strength.
Yeah.
And then you get so you've got just the ideas. Then you've got the 12 tribes, and then you begin getting physicality with Solomon. I mean, building a temple. You can actually get. Okay. You're getting more solid. All right.
We're
as you
yes. Okay.
Progress.
So we go from tent to tabernacle to temple to inner temple, where Jesus said, "You can tear this down, and in 3 days I can build it back up." Of course, they did not understand that, and so in the tabernacle, there was the same design that the temple was to have. It was quite lavish, and in the center was the Ark of the Covenant, in the Holy of Holies. Okay. God in a box, that's where God lived, and that was their understanding of the temple and its construction. Okay, we have at the center of our being that sacred place, and then we have the manifestation in these layers. So you have the outer courtyard, which is the riffraff. You have the inner courtyard, which are the people aspiring, the aspirations to.
So in the holy of the temple of our soul is what?
That spark of divinity.
So, because in the Holy of Holies in the temple in Jerusalem was the Ark of the Covenant.
Uh-huh.
Right.
And it's brought back to Jerusalem.
Right.
Yeah.
That's how it got in the temple in Jerusalem. Okay. Yeah. So what has in the parallel, what has replaced the Ark of the Covenant in the Holy of Holies in the temple of ourselves?
The Spirit.
The Spirit.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
And so we shouldn't go about seeking the Ark of the Covenant because it's been replaced by the Spirit.
No. The Ark of the Covenant had the Torah. All right.
Right. The law was a tutor to lead us to Christ.
Right.
Paul says.
And the law it's in this little box, and they carried that box around with them when they were in the wilderness.
But we needed to outgrow the box. Right?
We needed to get out of the box.
Get out of the box. And
Bethlehem is a place without walls. Okay, God, it's omnipresent, so it's a kind of
Isn't that the house of bread, Bethlehem, Bethlehem?
House of bread, substance, infinite substance, no boundaries. Yes, pure substance.
But the house of bread ran out of bread, but then it got bread back.
That's because bread, just like there was a famine in Canaan when Abraham arrived there, it's like a famine is a lack of spiritual nourishment. Oh, yes, thank you. And so if anybody has any questions or comments, I apologize for the lengthy stories, but you have to have the background in order to understand these relationships. And so if you would like to call in and ask a question, the telephone number is 816-301-6304. 816-301-6304.
I have a question.
Okay.
In the lesson 5,
Yes.
there's a group of scriptures that were given with the lesson, and then there's a whole bunch of other scriptures, which is actually the stream was talking about. So are there other scriptures for lesson 6 that you're going to talk about next week that we don't have on this lesson heading?
I will make sure. I will make sure that there is.
And you need 4, 5, and 6.
You need 4, 5, and 6. Okay. I will have them reconciled for you. And so I think we can see through the relationships that we have studied, whether it's Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, where it's Leah, Rachel, and Jacob, any of the relationships we have studied. And now tonight, we see Ruth and Naomi and Boaz, and we have Jonathan, David, and Saul with Mephibosheth included here, and we definitely need some other state of consciousness, some other faculty in consciousness to continue on in the building of the spiritual body.
There was. Can I make a comment? There was.
Yeah.
In Ruth in chapter 4 and verse 11. It was almost kind of funny when they said, "And the people who we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah."
Yes.
That was funny because Rachel and Leah.
Yes, I know.
What does that mean?
Carry on
They weren't exactly friends.
Carry on. Well, but remember, in the end, they came to an agreement that they would go with Jacob on his way back to forgive Esau. So, and so there's kind of an echo there of, okay, we're not going to like hug each other, but we're going to agree to the order. And what is the order? What comes first? Rachel. Okay, she is closest to Jacob. So love, even though it's out of the social order that it should be, Rachel first. He loved Rachel and her child. Benjamin wasn't born yet. And then second, Leah and her brood. And then the maids and their kids. And then all the possessions. And all of this has to be left on one side of the river so that Jacob can go on his own, one-to-one, and show Esau that he is serious about this reconciliation.
And, I see, both of whom built the house of Israel. So they were saying that in terms of, may Ruth have all the children that Leah and Rachel had.
Yes, right.
That's kind of what it's
yes,
saying.
yeah.
Yeah, okay. Now, and I did notice, in anticipation, I don't know whether you're coming back to this or not at any point in time in any other lesson, but Ruth, right, Naomi's family is Ephrathites?
Not Ephraim. No.
That's Ephraim. That's not Ephraim.
No,
okay.
no,
Okay.
no. I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but yeah.
But it makes a deal here because I was looking on into 1 Samuel, which comes right after.
Yeah.
That there was a certain man from the hill country of Ephraim.
Yeah.
And because Ephraim has to have some, and maybe this is it, has to have some significant thing because Abraham went out of his way to put his hand on Ephraim and not his older brother. And Joseph didn't go along with that. And Abraham insisted that he put his hand.
Okay. Well,
Jacob.
Jacob. Yeah.
Jacob insisted.
Yeah.
No. Abraham. I said Jacob. Abraham. Yeah. Jacob.
And so
insisted.
Joseph doesn't have a territory, but each of his sons do. So each of his sons has a tribe, Manasseh and Ephraim.
Yeah, Ephraim.
Okay.
Set apart. And that's got to have a significance somewhere.
Oh yeah, it does. And if you don't mind, I'd like to, because we have a few minutes left, and I'd like to talk about Job and his friends. Okay. And what I'm going to tell you is that friends can be adversarial as well. Good evening. Hello. Turn down the volume on your computer.
Oh. And what I'm going to tell you is... Okay.
Okay. You had a comment?
Yes, I didn't want to interrupt in the middle, but it looks like there's a delay in the thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
there is.
So I started watching around when you were talking about, you were finished talking about Naomi and Ruth and Boaz. And so I was looking at chapter 18, 1 Samuel chapter 18, and I was trying to figure out whether there was any description of the relationship between David and Jonathan before the beginning of chapter 18, and I don't think there is. They mention Jonathan and how he's helping, Saul, his father, fight the battles, and then they mention David, and David kills Goliath. And then it says, now when he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul.
Yeah, that's
So
the first.
I thought that was curious because there is no preparation whatsoever. There's no, I don't think, unless I missed it, there's no relationship at all. And then all of a sudden, there's this connection that's, very profound.
Yeah, and also that.
I'm kind of wondering how they, how that happened so suddenly.
What? Yeah, it's very similar to Elijah, because it just starts out in 1 Kings 19. Elijah the Tishbite. Who's that?
Right. It sort of appears from nowhere.
It appears from nowhere. And if there are antecedents, you will find clues there. All we know at this point is that David is a small person who did a heroic act and has suddenly emerged as a hero, and that is threatening to the king. Okay? Because he is afraid of losing popularity to all those who are acclaiming David for this great act. And so we don't know. His son has not figured at this point. So we don't know. Okay? But it's a good point. It emerges because we need to have this relationship between Jonathan and David. It's the next step in the evolution of consciousness. And I know that's not exact.
Here's the thought. In order to love someone, and to love someone as your own soul, you have to have a profound appreciation of that person. And obviously, Jonathan was witnessing the events of they're trying to figure out who can go up against Goliath, and nobody can do it, and then David, this unlikely person, comes and does it. So Jonathan must see something in David that is very attractive to him, which in itself is threatening to Saul, because,
Well, David
his son
represents...
is now enamored with this other guy.
David...
So anyway, I just thought that was one of those curious things, how the Bible just sort of pops stuff up right away, and you're like, oh, what was that? You have to keep reading, because there's all kinds of other things that happen. Anyway, thank you. Very
okay. David representing love. Love is a magnet, and it draws to itself. All right, so loved him as his own soul. He was attracted by the love nature. Okay. And I wanted to talk about, I know we're almost out of time, but this will not be complete without Job and his friends, because here's where the adversaries come in. Now, Job, here you have Job, a righteous man. He's called a righteous man. There is none like him. And there must be more growth there beyond righteous, at least in the conventional sense, because suddenly Satan, the adversary, that's the adversary within us, right? And the adversary, for instance, if you say, I really believe in the one power and one presence, I affirm it every day, I go to church on Sunday and I affirm it there, and it's like the universe says, oh yeah? Is that what you believe? Let's see what you believe when we heap some challenges on you. Okay, and so he has his possessions taken away. This is the first thing. You know, it's not so bad to lose your possessions. All right, all wealth was measured in livestock and cattle and sheep and all that. And then he maintains his faith throughout. And then his family and his, and his children and his wife is standing there saying, curse God and die. But he doesn't do that. He doesn't do that. He remains steadfast. But when it comes to his body, okay, his head, from head to toe, he's covered with boils and sores. And at one point, Job says, and this is a big point of this lesson, what I fear comes upon me. Do you do what you do out of fear or out of faith? Okay. So he has these three friends, and that's what all these numbers are about. And there are three sets of dialogues between Job and each of these friends. And the first friend, Eliphaz, essentially is saying, you must have done something wrong and God is punishing you. Okay, sometimes these are our inner voices that are talking to us. And I know a friend of mine who thinks that her troubles are coming as a punishment from God. Now, we say we believe in the one power and one presence, that God is the power and presence within us. But somehow, when there's a challenge, we go into default mode and fall back on something old. You're doing fine as long as everything's going well in your life. But when the challenges come, that is when you need to look at what you believe. So that's one guy. Yeah.
This Ruth said something kind of similar to what Job said, because at 113, she's talking to Naomi. Naomi said something similar when she's talking to Ruth and whoever the other girl is, Orpah, and telling them to go back to their families. Mm-hmm. She said, because the hand of the Lord has gone forth against me. Uh-huh. She's interpreting this that even God's against her.
God is believed to be the author of everything. God is responsible for your good times, and God is responsible for your bad times. So obey the law and you are blessed. Disobey the law and you are cursed. And that was like the mantra of that whole period, that God gives you love, God loves you, and God has tough love for you because God gives you all these challenges.
Now, so it seems like I'm hearing like, if God is responsible, then for whatever, then that God is judging. And aren't there other activities that God is capable of besides judging, like guiding, or it's not necessarily a judgment, but he's just doing some other work.
At a certain phase, each time the Israelites discover God functions in a different way, they add a name to him. So they discover along the way, oh, God is peace. God is a provider. God is, the banner of love. Yeah, sure, they discover all these things. But Orpah is a Moabite. She doesn't she doesn't have a good understanding of Judaic theology, and that is just the common way of looking at things. And that's what I was about to say about Bildad, too, because he says...
What did Orpah say? Why are we talking about Orpah?
You mentioned it.
No, that was Naomi said that.
Well, here she is from Bethlehem and in Moab, and she's talking to her daughter-in-law, okay? And this is the way they talk to one another. That was a common belief. But how you respond to that, it's the Moabite who responds with, I'm going with you to wherever you're going, and I'm going to go with your God because, anyway. But look at the three friends of Job, and they all have different ways of not being very comforting. We would call all of them metaphysical malpractice.
And Bildad, what was his thing?
His thing was, look, here's the way the law works. You obey the law. Okay, essentially, just accept it. Why can't you just accept it? And look at Job's response. He's defensive. All right? And then the final guy, which is probably the worst, where, these are all the voices inside of you telling you how you are to make sense of all of this when you are righteous. All right? And so the final guy, the third friend, says, you are a real sinner, and you better repent, or you're going to hell. In essence, that's what he says. Now, the fourth friend is what is important, because the fourth friend is truly a friend. And the fourth friend, Elihu, offers him spiritual understanding. And he says, where you were wrong was to argue with these other friends. He said, if you argue, you're arguing from the intellect. Arguing is of the intellect. Okay? Don't argue with them. When you argue, you're giving power to illusion. This is what the Pharisees did. They argued the law about what the law meant here and there. And Elihu, gives him some spiritual understanding. And what this ends up being is the transition from being self-righteous because you do everything right, you follow all the rules, you dot your I's and cross your T's, you make sacrifices when you're supposed to. He goes from that level of righteousness to meeting God face to face. And God says, hey, Job, I've got a few questions for you. Where were you when the creation was made? And so he is humbled into, and he said, before I only heard about you, and now I see you face to face. So that is the relationship we all have with God. And the final thing, and I'm already 6 minutes over time here, was I was going to talk about Jesus and the disciples, because at one point Jesus tells them, he says, before you were my disciples, now you are my friends. In other words, you become on an equal playing field with the master teacher. Isn't that why we create teachers? So we can pass on the knowledge. It's not always a relationship like this. It's like friends are on an equal basis with love and respect and honor. Sorry for you folks out there for going over time, but But thank you. And so just in closing, let's take a moment to close our eyes and remember the truth that there really is only one. One power, one presence, one life, one mind. And we are one with that one. And where there is any discord, we call on that faculty of love and judgment, giving us the wisdom to choose to resolve that into, again, oneness, unity. And for that awareness, we do give thanks. Amen. If you would like to support New Foundation, we enthusiastically encourage you to do that. Next week, we will conclude with the topic of the fulfillment of relationships. And so I'm going to bring in a lot of miscellaneous relationships because they were not by any means all covered here. So that will be the grand finale of this. And if there are any relationships in the Bible that you find that you would like to talk about, have an explanation for, let me know. All right, and so I wish you a